and welcome to the very first edition of the Driveway Devi Dialogues. Now, some of you who regularly follow us know that we routinely engage in interactions and dialogues with a lot of people. In fact, we've done over 200 of them, but those have been strictly on Instagram. And the idea to do a visual podcast had been brewing and stirring in me for a while, but I wasn't finding the time or the motivation to actually do it. And I want to take this opportunity, therefore, to extend my gratitude to my friend Dr. Farah Khan, who finally provided me the much needed impetus and the final push for making us do this. So thank you, Dr. Farah. And I'm absolutely thrilled also to introduce everybody to Jeevidha Saraswat. Jeevidha is our very first guest, and I think it's fair to say that whenever anybody starts something, people who agree to associate with that endeavor at the beginning, that in itself speaks volumes about them. Jeevidha is a Jaipur-based counseling psychologist. She's deeply interested in neurodivergence. She's been doing some wonderful work. And with her, we will delve into that and also some other areas generally regarding mental health. So welcome, Jeevidha, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction. I am very excited to be part of the podcast and share my views and know your learnings as well, because I've been doing it for a very long time now. So I'm hoping it's going to be a very exciting space to share my knowledge and also to have that interaction with you.
I've been wondering, and I don't know how I didn't ask you this earlier, or maybe I did, I don't remember, I'm getting old. What does Jeevidha mean?
It means gift of God.
Wow, okay, gift of God, all right. And, Jeevidha, tell me a little bit about, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this actually. Let me give you a little bit of a context. A lot of children I teach are in middle and high school, and out of them, I've noticed a fair few learners and students nowadays are considering psychology as a subject to study further and quite seriously. So talk a little bit about your understanding and observation of दो चीजें, एक साइकोलॉजी की पढ़ाई के बाद क्या क्या एवेन्यूज हैं, एंड बी, आर देयर एनी prerequisites in terms of personality traits, disposition, or qualities that if an individual had would be really helpful to go into that kind of work.
Okay, so talking about now people or students going into the field of psychology, it's wonderful to hear and it's wonderful to know that we have more professionals adding onto the field. Because it also leads down to making it a more a profession that will be taken more seriously.
Yeah.
That will be taken. That will be it will be more easily accessible by the people.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful to know. They can do their bachelor, and if I talk about their education. So they can do their bachelor's in psychology, they can pursue their master's in psychology, and we have different specializations for, say, counseling, clinical, organizational psychology, etc. And if somebody wants to be into a clinical psychology, we had MPhil in clinical psychology.
Correct.
But now it is going to stop, and then we have MPsych by Rehabilitation Council of India.
Okay.
So they have their rules and regulations regarding that. So they can go to that segment aspect or sector as well. And
if मेरा education में एक counter question था, is there anything like a mandate in terms of you should have had XYZ subjects in high school in order to pursue psychology later, whether it's mandated or it is recommended? ऐसा कुछ है?
It's not mandated. It is recommended because in +1, +2, if you study psychology, it helps you a lot in bachelor's and master's as well.
Okay.
So the base if we say the base is created there, or if even if they don't have it and they are very high or they're highly interested in the subject, they can directly choose it in their bachelor's as well.
So I can tell you that in terms of जहाँ तक business administration का सवाल है, as academic counselors, it is always our advice to students and parents that if the individual is planning to do an MBA, please don't do a BBA because it's very repetitive. So when you recommend psychology in plus two, and then it'll form a base, it is a base, it's not repetitive?
It's not repetitive, I'll say, because it's an evolving subject till now. You'll see a lot of things that you have already studied in plus one, plus two, but that's in very crisp form.
Right. Okay.
So in detail, then you study, and then you study that in masters as well. And if you are into particular domains of it, if you're specializing in, then you study according to your specializations. So it's not repetitive, but it is adding on to the things that you've already studied.
Makes sense. And moving on to the qualities that I asked you about, I know that various specializations would probably require a slightly different set of qualities, but अगर मैं broadly पूछूं कि कोई अगर किसी भी shape and form का therapist बनना चाहता है, या that's the aspiration, then what are these few qualities that can really help?
Okay, so I wouldn't say that if we write down some qualities and that is only specifically needed, right? People learn and evolve.
Of course.
So even while studying subjects, some people I have personally seen that they have studied and they have evolved into a very good psychologist or into a very good therapist. So it depends on how do they learn and how do they evolve. But if I talk about the bookish qualities of it, a person should be a good listener. They should be patient. They should provide the non-judgmental space when they are in the therapist chair. So those are some basic things that we expect out of a psychologist or a counselor.
What about empathy?
It is very important. So
I'll tell you. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I'll tell you why I'm asking about empathy. And I am myself, having now run and led Driveway Devi for 2.5 years. I have just started a psychological counseling postgraduate program myself. And because, as some of you know, one of the very important activities or functions or services that we at Driveway Devi provide is that we act as a bridge service where we connect individuals in distress to appropriate mental health professionals. Now, recently, and by sheer coincidence, we had a few cases where we had to be very, very constantly 24/7 involved because they were slightly emergency cases, there were suicidal tendencies, attempts, etc. And I found myself being absolutely mentally, psychologically, and for that matter, physically fatigued at the end of those days, that entire week, 10 days. And then I had this very interesting sort of academic discussion with another counselor who said that while empathy is very, very important, you have to get yourself to a point where you don't bring that work and that stress home. Now, it always confounds me that how can you, if you are an empath, do this kind of compartmentalization?
So it's about creating boundaries with your work and how do you take it. So I completely agree with the fact that a counselor or as people, we should be empathetic towards the person who is in distress. But then we as people also need to understand that we are in a certain profession and we need to create a boundary around it, because dealing with people who have some or the other kind of psychological issues or some kind of distress or stressful situations in their life, you'll hear a lot of issues that have been shared by them, right? And some are there where you feel like, oh, okay, this is something that's really that has been, you pity for the person, right? You feel very emotional about it. But then by the end of the session or by the end of it, you also create a boundary by yourself. Okay, now the session ends and now I have to be on my own. So that I feel like how do we learn to create boundaries is something that helps.
And is that something you can teach? So I will seek your assistance, because I'm failing miserably at creating these boundaries, and it's really sort of it can drain you of your vitality, and it's terribly unfair on your own personal life.
So it's taxing. It's emotionally and physically taxing. And if, as you talked about, they were emergency cases. You feel like even a second is important, right? So it as a person depends how do we create boundaries and how do we see to our work, or how we can maintain our things with them.
Yeah, but I couldn't agree with you more that boundary creation is very, very important. I mean, I have been very rightly told, for example, that I'm available to all and sundry and to the rest of the world all the time. And then when there's a problem within the family, I'm not there because I'm running after somebody else. So those kinds of things can happen. Okay. Now let's get into neurodivergence, and you've been doing your work focus has been there, your passion and interest is there, your understanding and insights are there. I think it's fair to say that there is a lot of misunderstanding and confusion, even in terms of understanding a very basic definition of what neurodivergence is. I can again share with experience that since I teach kids who are pretty much 7 or 8-year-olds and upwards, ever so often I have parents coming in with their warts, and I feel that that particular child is on some kind of spectrum or the other, and either the vast majority of parents are either in denial, or even more, they are completely unaware. And I'm not criticizing them. It's just that there is a terrible lack of knowledge and information out there. So it would be wonderful if you could explain to us, as if you're explaining a 5-year-old, what is neurodivergence?
Okay. So if we talk about diversity, we understand that there are different aspects, there are different segments coming in, right? Same with the neurological aspect of it. Neurologically, they are different, right? Some kids or some children, their mind or their brain develops neurologically different, and when it leads down to their social understanding. So, per se, the differences between their social understanding, the differences between their understanding of some concept or the cognitive processes. So that makes them neurologically different from the people. Those are neurotypical. Now, what is neurotypical is our brains are similar in the sense of how do they develop, right? How do we think that's different? But then how do they develop? They are in the same form.
So I'm sorry, I go on interrupting just to get more clarity and to make sure that we are understanding correctly. When you say development, it means that a certain roadmap of hitting certain common milestones, etc., is what a certain bulk of or mass of people is going through, and therefore they are neurotypical. In the sense that, let's say there are 100 kids, and unme se 60-70, they will hit certain developmental milestones around about the same time, and that is what would make them neurotypical.
Right, right. So, not only talking about the milestones, so we do hit the developmental milestone at certain point of time, right? 3 months mein hona chahiye, 6 months mein the child should sit, or etc., right? So, either this is delayed or sometimes it's absent. So that makes them neurologically different. It also comes down to their cognitive aspects. It also comes down to their social emotional aspects. So there are a lot of aspects that are hampered. If hampering is not the right word,
it's different.
It's different. So that is why they process the world around them very differently. So that, if we put it in a very simple way, this is because they are neurologically different.
My follow-up question here is that are neurodivergents developing differently only psychologically or physically as well? Or, because there, I would imagine, and whatever little I've read and observed, that the development of the mind also informs the development of the physicality, like motor skills. As the mind develops, you can see that is being manifested in a heightened ability to do things with the hands, etc.
Right. So it is psychologically, of course, there have been delays, but sometimes the motor skills, the fine motor and the gross motor skills, if we talk about, they are also delayed. Those are not developed. So it takes, like through therapies, through sessions, through their OT sessions, there are a lot of professional spaces that they can go to, and they help them do that. So it can be there that the physical development is also delayed, but it also depends on what kind of neurological disorder they have, neurodevelopmental disorder they have. It depends on that as well.
I want to talk about a very important point. I'm going to sound crude, I'm going to sound crass, but it's very, very critical that we talk about this. A lot of times, whether parents and families admit it or not, neurodivergents are different, but they are perceived with another D word, which is dumb. And please understand and please shed light on this, that they are different. That has nothing to do with their aptitude, or they will be skilled or very, very proficient in other areas and not necessarily on that one charted path.
Right. So in our society, we take academics as
the final yardstick.
The final yardstick, the ultimate milestone of judging a child by what they can do.
Correct.
So if they are not, if I talk about particularly neurodivergent people, if they are not able to do well in academics, so people do judge them. People do even in the school, teachers do call them by certain labels, or they do give the labels. So talk about it, they can be highly skillful in a certain area, be it crafts or be it anything, be it music. So there are people who are autistic and wonderful singers. We have examples of them. There are people who are who fall into certain neurodevelopmental disorder, and they're very good at creating crafts. So there can be, you need to identify what skill set they are well off in, and then we can work upon that, because people with neurodivergence require a similar and a followed up timetable. So if they start, for say, if we talk about that, if you start their day by 7 a.m. Regularly, they should start by 7 a.m. because it is very difficult for them to process the smaller changes as well.
So what you're essentially saying is that they're creatures of habit. So you have to stick to that, whatever regiment has been
right. So there are
formulated.
Patterns that they form. Of course, we need not to always follow the patterns. We need to break the patterns to adjust them well in the society, to let them accommodate well. But also, they like that their routine should be followed, so that they're able to function in a better and appropriate way.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I suppose it gives them a sense of control and familiarity.
Right.
There's another aspect to this which I want to talk about. Are there scientifically, do we know some or all or in-depth information about what causes neurodivergence in the first place?
Okay, so there are no specific causes that have been defined. There have been genetic factors that have been affecting. There have been environmental factors that can affect them, social factors that leads to. So it's a mix of all the major factors that comes down, and it leads to that. There are some neurodevelopmental disorders that are particularly because of genetic dysfunctioning or genetic causes. So it has not been particularly known that this leads to this. this has not been known.
But are these...
There have been researches about various things. There's a possibility of that this can cause this, but there has been, it is not said or put out 100%, oh, this leads to this.
Has it been observed that most or a lot of neurodivergent conditions are from birth, or do they develop later on?
Neurodevelopmental conditions are from birth.
From birth.
They can be diagnosed at a very later stage as well if they are into a manageable form. So people who have mild level of severity, or say if I talk about autism, if I talk about ADHD, if it's on mild level, so that can be diagnosed on a very later stage when the child or when the person feels like, oh, now the things are not manageable and there is some professional help needed. But if the child or the person falls into a moderate to severe level, then the symptoms are very much visible in their early years as well. So that time it can be diagnosed.
So that is the perfect segue for my next question, because in any case, as you know from our online interactions also, we always like to give our audiences some takeaway, some information that is practical and usable. Which is this, and I suspect you agree that a lot of parents are either unaware or, one doesn't want to admit certain things about one's own children. It's as simple as that. It's basic human psychology. What are some ways of detection, and that too early detection?
Okay, so it depends on what symptoms or signs the child is showing. If I particularly talk about, for say, autism spectrum disorder, many of the kids are diagnosed by the age of 2 to 3 years as well, because they show a lot of signs and symptoms that are predominantly present in spectrum kids.
But I think it will be fair to say that ab jahan tak autism ka sawal hai, the way the symptoms present are a lot more obvious.
Yes. So it comes down to what's the level of severity for the kid. If it is very much obvious, then they can then they are able to see to the symptoms and they can seek professional help. But if the symptoms are not too visible, then it can also be diagnosed at a later age as well. So it depends on how the child is showing us those symptoms. I wouldn't say there's some early detection about it. It completely depends on how the child is showing to us and how the child is processing the things around them.
It's a slightly complex and nuanced matter, I think you'll agree, because अब जैसे मैंने बहुत सारे ऐसे cases देखे हैं जहाँ पे there is some sort of degree of ADHD, and so many of these parents will say कि अरे बहुत ज़्यादा बदमाश है और बहुत ज़्यादा चंचल है. So then it becomes a bit tricky, because that individual, for no fault of his or hers, just carries on not getting the professional intervention that they ought to have.
Right. So it comes down to the awareness of their parents. If the person is a child or an adolescent and if they're not aware of it. But now, fortunately, if they're going into a school, and because every school has school counselors, so if they have that space and opportunity to get to have a screening process about it, that's helpful to them. But then this is very this is truly put forward that in our society till now, if I particularly talk about ADHD, people do consider it as कि बहुत बदमाश है, बहुत ज़्यादा भागता दौड़ता है. So that's there, but then still there's slowly and gradually understanding that it is also affecting in other aspects of their life, into their daily functioning as well. So when it comes down to affecting our daily functioning, then a professional help is needed.
You are right. I am basically, मैं आपकी बात से सहमत हूँ that this whole thing is in a process of evolution, and more, I believe it's mandated now that there be some kind of a mental health professional on campus, वगैरह. But of course, वो तो एक इतना बड़ा debate है. We can have 3 sessions on that only separately, in terms of the sheer efficacy or lack thereof of one individual and mental health professional and just look at the ratio, that is to 2,000, 3,000 students. So, but anyway, steps are being made in the right direction. The other aspect that I've personally observed, and this is going to be, it may be like a trick question because it's one of those situations where agar English mein bole to it's like Sophie's choice, Hindi mein bole to it's literally like aage khai piche kuan. Because now let's say there is a neurodivergent child and it's been diagnosed, everything is fine, he or she is on a set program, vagera vagera. In terms of that child's education, you can either continue to send them to quote-unquote traditional school, and now again more and more traditional schools are open to taking neurodivergent children, and they are happy to create the infrastructure and resources to tackle those situations. Or, of course, you can now also send them to a growing number of very specialized institutions and facilities that are opening up. The catch-22 situation is that in both situations, there is equal stigma. So at traditional school, these kids are made fun of. But if they don't go to traditional school and if they go to special school, then also they are made fun of. So what is the better option?
I wouldn't say what's the better option. It depends on what is better for the child. It depends on how are they progressing and in what environment they are progressing well. So it depends on that. But more and more schools are coming forward to create an inclusive environment, and it is so good to know about that they're creating a society that's more inclusive of all. So I've been working in the same area with Vatsalya Legacy, and we are working into the same segment of allowing or creating, majorly providing them the space to go into a mainstream education, or mainstream school, as we call as traditional schools, and creating acceptance around the teachers and the kids as well, that the kids are neurologically different, but they can also be accommodated if the level of severity is mild and they are at a point where they know, and we also know that they're manageable enough into a mainstream education school. Whereas if the level of severity is so much where the kids are not able to accommodate in the certain environment, we have special schools, we have special programs, we have special sessions running for them to let them learn different things in their way of learning. So it depends on what environment the child is progressing well and what's helping them to progress.
I think that's a very, very mature and logical answer. It should be completely determined by that very individual. I couldn't agree more. एक बहुत ज़रूरी चीज़ मुझे याद आई थी. हाँ, when you say that, yes, that's what you guys are also doing at Vatsalya, which is absolutely fabulous. It's so required, so critical. I think that the problem is that at a traditional school, along with creating that environment and infrastructure, which may be hiring and appointing special educators, having certain physical hard product infrastructure that is more suited to their needs and requirements, it's equally important to have sensitization and orientation for all stakeholders and parties involved. Now, with my own daughter, whom I would like to believe my wife and I have brought up to be reasonably sensitive, aware, even somebody like her, when in her class at school a few years ago, there was a neurodivergent child who had joined. Every day she would come and make fun of him. Wo ye karta hai, she would mimic him, etc. And it took a lot of sustained effort for us to orient such a young child that, aise bhi hota hai, and this is not, he's not trying to be funny, and he's not trying to be an idiot or a moron, and this, that, and, and uske level pe use theek se samjhana pada.
Right. So it's wonderful to know that as parents you have done that and educate the child about neurodivergence is also present in the society and they can also be a part of your school or your environment. But it is very important, as you rightly said, that it is all the stakeholders, all the staff should also be oriented about uh, neurodivergence if the school is or the institution is inclusive of them, because if they are not acceptable, if they don't provide that space, if they are not acceptable towards what behaviors, what functioning needs to be done, then we cannot work in a collaborative way. So we do provide, like I work with the organization, and we do provide those orientation programs as well to them, to let them know what is neurodivergence and how do they can help their kids, how do they can work with the kid, how what behaviors the kid can possibly show, or what can be calming to them if there's a particular situation where they're not feeling adjusted well in the environment. So this is very important, and even to the helpers as well, because they also need to understand in what way they can communicate with the kid. If the kid doesn't have speech, in what way you need to see the signs and symptoms if they are communicating by any way for anything. So it is very important to let them also know that this kid, how you can adjust with this kid. If the kid is adjusting to the environment also needs to adjust well with the kid.
Finally, before we wrap up, and very selfishly, I want you to talk in the context of Jaipur specifically, because that's where Driveway Devi is and that's where Jeevidha is. Particularly at Vatsalya and the wonderful work that you folks have been doing, I would love for you to share a little bit about the kinds of services and work, particularly in a neurodivergent context, that has been going on at Vatsalya, so that the city at large knows that, okay, fine, these options are available to us.
Okay. So I've been working with Vatsalya as a counseling psychologist. So we do provide them developmental sessions. So there's a program that we run called as the Bridge, and we associate with different schools to let them to provide a inclusive environment for the kids who are neurologically different or who are neurodivergent. So we work with them in the school so that they are also able to accommodate well in the school. They are also able to function with the other kids as per their capacity and their bandwidth. So we do that. The sessions are designed in a particular format of how we can help them, and depending on the needs and the capabilities of the kid. So that way we do that. So they have been the Vatsalya have been doing wonderful work in providing the space of inclusive education, particularly if I talk about. So that's there. If we particularly talk about
that's so. Again, if I'm understanding correctly, I'm a very moderately intelligent person. My wife thinks I'm even lesser. So if, let's say, there's a traditional school and they have certain learners or students or individuals who are neurodivergent, you guys as an organization can go in and sort of handhold that individual and the school in evolving that person's professional intervention, both mental health wise and in terms of their education.
Right. So we can provide both. So we have a group, a team of therapists. Everybody has their specialization. So we do that. If we take an example of, if a kid comes to a school and he or she is neurologically different and the school informs us about that, so we can do that way. And if a kid comes to our organization and they want to go into school, so we can go on to the schools where we are collaborating and they can work well. So our therapists have go to the child in the school daily and as per their needs, how many sessions are required, and they provide them the professional help.
Got it. So it can, the route can be either the school or through you guys. That's fine. finally, and of course, without getting into figures, etc., मैं ये समझना चाहता हूं कि इस तरह का इंटरवेंशन जब आप लोग करते हैं किसी भी स्कूल के साथ, एक पर्टिकुलर स्टूडेंट के लिए who is actually the beneficiary of your services, what kind of financial burden comes on that set of parents? Is it significantly more and in addition to the school fee?
I wouldn't put up numbers, but of course it's addition to the school fee, because the extra services have been provided to the kid, and according to that it is being charged.
So now that I've been so awfully sweet, I'm going to turn the tide a little bit, reverse things, and throw you straight into the deep end. These are going to be questions that are loosely connected with your own mental wellness. Yeah?
Alright.
And try to answer them as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. All right. A song that relaxes you.
Lag Ja Gale.
A song that peps you up.
Some Bollywood song. Can be anything.
A movie that you love watching over and over again.
Tare Zameen Par.
All right. Your go-to unwinding activity.
I like crafts, art and crafts a lot, so I do that.
Your safe space person.
My sister and my friends.
Okay. And your safe space?
My room.
Okay. All right. I'm going to give you options. Beach, mountains, or desert holiday?
Mountains.
Relaxing vacation or adventure-filled vacation?
Relaxing. Vacation should be relaxing.
I couldn't agree more. Do you like to be in a state of complete disconnection or extreme connection?
A balance of both.
Winter or summer?
Neither.
Okay, so then what's the...
So it's like the season that comes after summer, like after rainy season. So a little bit of winter.
Okay.
Not the extreme or peak of
Okay,
it.
all right. Love or friendship?
Friendship. From friendship you get love as well.
One reason you love Jaipur?
It's the place that I relate to the most, and it's been a very safe environment for me.
One reason you dislike Jaipur?
The trash all over.
One reason you love your work?
I've been very passionate about listening to people and their perspectives of how do they take things up.
Okay. And one reason you dislike your work sometimes?
I sometimes feel it takes a lot of time to get a space of where you feel like, oh, I'm settled in my work.
Okay.
So in the field of psychology, because still growing in our country, so I feel like we still don't have that space where we can just go and apply, or we can just go and work very easily. It takes a lot to convince people, or it takes a lot to reach out to people, or to let them know, oh, it also matters, and you can also reach out to psychologists or therapists out there. So it makes that part is little difficult. Otherwise, I love my work.
That's a very interesting point you bring up, though, and if I can ask you a few follow-up questions so that I understand you correctly. You're saying that in terms of work opportunities, it's not ideal. There can be more or better, both quantitatively and qualitatively.
Right.
Do you think it might be better in quote-unquote a metro city?
It is, because again, it comes down to awareness of people, because people are aware about it, so they do approach psychologists, or they do approach clinical psychologists or therapists, whosoever they want to approach to. But then when it comes down to tier 2, tier 3 cities, it's still developing. So that is again a point of concern. But then I feel like the awareness contributes a lot to our field.
I think it might be fair to say that in most sectors of work, it's a simple demand-supply thing. When there's a demand for a product or service, there'll be various options available in the marketplace. Do you think that it's less developed in a place like Jaipur or other tier 2 cities as compared to, like we said, the metros? Because fundamentally, the understanding and the openness and eagerness to seek professional mental help itself is not evolved yet.
Right, very rightly put forward. So again, this is a point where we feel like ki awareness is not there. Also, it is again there is a demand. There is even less supply. It comes down to that people are not wanting to come to a professional because of the stigma around it. So that's the whole point of it.
But I think what's good is that people such as yourself and more youngsters and freshers who come into that line of work, to that realm, and populate the marketplace, that's how really it'll grow. Because with you and people like yourself coming, it's also indicative of your own micro constructs, your families. You guys will get married, you will be a lot more open and woke, and that whole cycle will therefore move forward.
Yeah, so again, it is about how do you meet people, if they're wanting to know about it, if they're wanting to understand about it. It can start with our family members, it can start with our friends. And those friends, those family members can turn it down to other people as well in their network.
Correct. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Let's do some word association very quickly. I want you to say, ideally, one word responses. First thing that pops up in your head.
So
black. Sorry, you were saying something.
We do word association test is also psychological assessment.
I know, but I can promise you that I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you.
Today I'm on the other hand of the table.
Okay, so let's see what happens. Black.
Clothes.
White.
Peace.
Happy.
People.
Sad.
Situations.
Star.
Thankful.
Love.
Again, thankful.
Stress.
Situation.
Calm.
My place.
Very good. Considering this was your first tryst with an on-camera rapid fire, I think you've done reasonably well. So not nearly as fancy as some other gifts and gift hampers, but we do have a little gift for you until somebody extremely astute and far-sighted and intelligent decides to sponsor us. This is what we'll have to make do with.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. It's been absolutely lovely chatting with you. Lots of practical information. I find myself constantly apologizing to my guests because I am very privileged. We get such brilliant and learned people, and then I end up asking them the most fundamental and basic questions, because really I think there is a need for very, very basic psychoeducation first, and then we can get into more nuanced conversations on the same themes and topics. But you've explained things very simply, very effectively, and just the fact that you've taken so much time, and I can reveal on a Sunday, is really, really appreciated. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been wonderful chatting with you and getting a space where I can talk about it. So, hoping to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you all for watching.